Hello, my name is Estelle, and this is the story of my romance with Warren. I'm 66 years old, and until recently, I thought my story had already been fully written. After my kids moved out and my husband left, not by choice, but by fate, the house became too big. The days started to feel heavy. Silence, which once felt like rest, turned into a constant echo of everything that once was. I'm not someone who gives in easily, but I'll admit, loneliness has a quiet way of settling in. First comes the morning without shared coffee, then lunch made out of habit, and finally the afternoon. Oh, the afternoon. Too long, too quiet. I would sit on the porch, watch the wind move through the leaves of the loquat tree, and wonder, is there still a part of me waiting to bloom? It was during one of those afternoons that I saw a flyer taped to the bakery window. Senior choir, mature voices, hearts in harmony. I smiled without thinking. Not that I knew how to sing, or that I was even looking for friends, but something in that phrase tugged at me. Mature voices, maybe mine, needed to be heard, even if only by me. I showed up to the first class with a tight chest, unsure where I would fit in. The coordinator, Mrs. Lorraine, welcomed me with a sincere hug, the kind you haven't received in years. You came in the right tone, Estelle. Here, we sing with the soul. It was the first time in months I felt like I was in the right place. In the beginning, I only mumbled the lyrics, afraid of getting it wrong. I sat toward the back, half hidden, but I watched everything. The laughter, the stories exchanged between songs, the care they had for one another. It was a group of people who had lived a lot, suffered too, and yet allowed themselves to feel again. An older man with white hair sang operas with his eyes closed. A lady with arthritis strummed the guitar like she was writing poetry in the air. Each person had their pain, their light, and me, right there among them, trying to relearn how to listen to myself. You sing like you're trying to say something you haven't said yet, Mrs. Lorraine once told me after a song. That struck deep, because it was true. I was there to tell myself that there was still life inside me, that I could still feel, laugh, miss a note, forget a lyric, and still belong. I went home that day with a new lightness in my chest. I made myself coffee, and for the first time in a long time, put on some music. I sang softly, following the melody with a shy smile. I joined the choir to fill time, but I discovered what I really needed was to fill my heart. And in that simple hall, with wooden benches and trembling hands holding sheet music, I found a new place for my voice. I always said I couldn't sing. Actually, if someone asked me to give a little performance, I'd laugh and say, better not, or it'll start raining. It was like a shield, a way to protect myself from trying, from failing, from being exposed. But in that choir, something started to change. Not all at once, but like the first drops of a gentle rain you don't even notice starting. I remember the first time they asked me to sing a part solo. It was just a regular rehearsal. No audience, just us. But my heart beat like I was on a stage in front of 1,000 people. My voice came out shaky, almost a whisper. You can try again, Estelle. No rush, said Mrs. Lorraine with a smile that felt like a hug. I took a deep breath and went for it. And for the first time, I didn't try to be perfect. I just tried to feel. At the end of the song, someone in the back said, "You have a beautiful voice. Sweet, you know, the kind that people listen to with their heart." It caught me off guard. I turned red like a schoolgirl, but inside, a small joy began to bloom. In the following rehearsals, I started singing a little louder. Still afraid, of course. Still missing a lyric now and then. But I no longer hid in the back of the room. Little by little, I realized that pitch came more from emotion than technique, that singing was more about allowing than controlling. One day, one of the sopranos was absent, and they asked me to step in, just to fill the part. I almost declined, but the whole group encouraged me. "Go for it, Estelle. We've got your back." That gave me courage, and I went. The note I thought I couldn't reach came out whole, clear, full of feeling. When the song ended, some clapped. "You shined, girl," said Mrs. Mabel, who was usually quite critical. I laughed with teary eyes. I felt alive. I felt like I belonged. I started singing without fear. In the shower, doing the dishes, even in line at the bank. My neighbors probably thought I'd lost it, but I didn't care. It was like, suddenly, my voice was connected to my heart, and for the first time in a long time, the two were in sync. Who would have thought, huh, Estelle? I told myself one night, looking at my reflection in the mirror. So much stored in this heart, and it's all coming out now through the voice. Music brought me back, not just to the world, but to myself. I rediscovered a part of me I didn't even know existed. And when you find something like that, buried so deep inside, it's impossible to go back to the way things were. Today, when someone asks if I can sing, I answer, yes, I can. I sing with my soul. Because in the end, it wasn't just about singing. It was about hearing myself again. About remembering that, even after everything, there's still beauty in allowing yourself to bloom. And my flower, curiously enough, had the shape of a song. The first time he walked into the choir room, we were rehearsing a passage of Ave Maria. The voices were still timid, but harmonious. When I heard the first notes of the piano, it wasn't just any sound. It was like someone had dusted off an old emotion inside me and handed back a piece of my soul. Warren. That was the name Mrs. Lorraine said casually, like he was just another volunteer. But he wasn't. He arrived like someone who wasn't in a hurry, with a calmness that contrasted with the anxious energy of our rehearsals. Tall, with well-groomed gray hair, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and a gaze. Oh, that gaze. Kind, curious, almost silent, and still, it seemed to say everything. I sat on my usual bench, but for the first time, missed my cue. Mrs. Lorraine whispered playfully, "You're distracted, Estelle." And I just smiled, sheepishly, trying to hide the blush rising to my cheeks. I tried to sing like always, but something felt different that day. The music felt more alive, more intense, like every note wanted to dance with the emotions I was trying to keep under control. The way Warren's fingers moved across the keys was almost hypnotic. He didn't just play. He told a story with the piano. And I, even without knowing what story it was, knew I wanted to hear it to the end. He listened to us attentively, looked up from time to time, and when his eyes met mine, he quickly looked away, but not before smiling. It was a simple smile, but it stirred something in me, more than I cared to admit. At the end of rehearsal, he walked up to me. "You have a beautiful voice. It has emotion," he said, with that deep, calm voice that sounded like it cradled its own thoughts. I thanked him, unable to hold eye contact for long. My heart was racing like I was a teenager again. "Had you sung before?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I only just learned how to hear myself." He smiled again, longer this time. "Then you learned quickly." I left rehearsal with a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just joy or nervousness. It was like something new was slowly approaching, quietly, but strong enough to shake me inside. Over the following days, I noticed I looked forward to rehearsals with a different kind of anticipation. Not just to sing, but to see him, to hear his piano, to meet that kind gaze again. And I wondered silently, did he feel it too? Did he notice the effect he had on me? My heart, which until then had been following the melody of healing, was now beginning to rehearse a new song. And though I didn't know the lyrics yet, something inside told me it would be worth learning. It was just an ordinary Thursday, or so it seemed. The choir had just finished rehearsing a new song, and everyone was saying goodbye with that joyful energy of people who, even tired, leave with a light soul. I was already packing up my sheet music when I heard his voice behind me, low, almost hesitant. "Estelle, do you think you could stay a little longer? I'd like to hear your voice, with no one else around." My heart leapt. I tried to act natural, but the truth was my hands were trembling slightly as I held the music folder. I nodded with a restrained smile. "Sure, just for a bit." I didn't want him to know that inside. I was completely taken over by expectation. The room slowly emptied, until it was just the two of us, and the silence that grew between one breath and the next. Warren returned to the piano with his usual calm, adjusted the bench, ran his fingers over the keys like greeting an old friend. "I chose a song that suits your voice," he said, without looking at me directly. "It's simple, but it has soul." He began to play, and the sound filled the space with such delicacy that I closed my eyes for a moment. When the melody called me, I opened my mouth and sang, alone. Just me and the sound of that piano. My voice, which once trembled in front of any audience, now came out steady, as if it knew exactly what it wanted to say. I felt every word of the song, as if I were stitching memories together with melody. And as I sang, I saw from the corner of my eye that he was watching me, not with judgment, but with a gentleness that completely disarmed me. It was as if he was truly listening to me, more than I had ever listened to myself. When I finished the last note, I kept my eyes closed for just a second longer, and in that brief moment, I felt the warmth of his body getting closer. Warren had gotten up without me noticing, and suddenly his hands were around my shoulders from behind. Gentle, steady. My body reacted before my mind. I didn't move away. I stayed there, breathing slowly, leaning into his chest, listening to a heartbeat that seemed almost in sync with mine. He lowered his head slightly, and right near my ear said, "You know there's more here than just music, don't you?" I stayed quiet, feeling the vibration of his voice in the air and inside me. I didn't need to answer, because I knew, since the first chord, since the first glance, what was forming between us was more than harmony or timing. It was a feeling that didn't need words. We stayed there, still, as if any movement could break the delicacy of that moment. His arms were still around my shoulders with a rare kind of tenderness, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. It just arrives. I could hear his breathing, calm and deep, and tried to control mine, which stubbornly sped up like a young girl in love for the first time. The last note still echoed inside me, but what lingered even more was what came after. The silence. A silence full of meaning, of questions neither of us dared to ask. My chest tightened, not with anxiety, but with expectation, because in that space between a gesture and a word lived all the feelings we hadn't yet figured out how to name. I slowly turned, wanting to look into his eyes, and when I found them, they were so close, so intense, I almost lost my breath. There was something there, vulnerability, desire, maybe even fear of crossing an invisible line, of ruining a melody we had been composing with such care. But there was also beauty, a beauty that left me defenseless. "Warren," I said, softer than I intended, but he understood. I didn't need to finish the sentence. He just smiled gently, as if to say, "I know," and loosened his arms without stepping away completely. The gesture was clear. He was letting me go, but not letting me feel alone. I took a step back, more to catch my breath, than out of a real desire to leave. I sat on one of the benches in the room, and he did the same, at the piano, but didn't play. We stayed like that. He looked at the keys. I looked at him. Neither of us said a word, but the silence was loud, and I heard every unspoken word. The I felt it too. The "did it move you as well?" The "do you think we could?" I wondered if it was too soon to feel all of this, if it was right, if it was wise. But, honestly, after a certain age, you stop searching for certainty and start valuing what's real. And in that moment, the only truth was that something existed between us, something that didn't need explanations or labels, just time and courage. "That was beautiful, wasn't it?" he said at last, still looking at the piano. I nodded, the lump in my throat rising. It was more than beautiful. It was necessary. He stood up slowly, grabbed his coat, and offered me his arm. "Shall we?" he asked, with a sweetness that made me smile from within. We walked to the door without saying another word, but with the certainty that something had changed. We didn't know what or where it would lead, but we knew that rehearsal wasn't over. It had only changed key. And sometimes, the silence between two people says more than any song ever could. After that silent, meaningful rehearsal, everything changed, without a single word being spoken. There were no declarations, no promises, just a longer glance, a lighter smile, and a tenderness that seemed to wrap every gesture in a new layer of care. I returned to choir rehearsals as someone who was going to reconnect with a part of herself, and also as someone who was quietly hoping to see someone again. Little by little, our paths began to cross outside the piano room. First came a casual invitation. "Estelle, would you like to grab a coffee after rehearsal? There's a charming little bakery nearby, and I know a cornmeal cake that could change your day." I said yes, and he was right. The cake was good, but the best part was the conversation. We didn't talk much about music during that first coffee. He told me he'd been widowed for almost 10 years, that he left his business life behind to dedicate himself to what truly made him happy, music and people. I listened with attention, with that curiosity that comes when you realize you're sitting across from someone special. Before I knew it, we had finished our coffee, and I didn't want to leave. Yet, "There's something different about you, Warren," I said, without thinking much. He laughed. "Different good or different weird?" I laughed too. different beautiful. He looked into my eyes, and that was when I knew. We were in perfect sync. We started repeating those coffee dates, after almost every rehearsal. And even when there wasn't a rehearsal, we found excuses to see each other. We exchanged songs over the phone. He would send me old boleros I hadn't heard in decades, and I'd send back songs that had marked moments in my youth. "This one reminds me of the summer of '74, I'd say. And he'd reply, "Then I'll listen to it with a taste of sunshine." It was all so gentle, unhurried, with no unrealistic expectations. There was a tenderness in our gestures that made me feel young, without needing to deny my age. When he held my hand to cross the street, when he pulled out a chair for me at the cafe, or when he watched me sing with that quiet sparkle in his eyes, it was like he was saying, "You matter," without ever needing to say it aloud. I caught myself looking forward to those meetings the way you wait for the next song in a concert, and the most beautiful part of it all was knowing that he felt the same. Not in intensity, but in consistency, in the respect, the gentleness, the care with which he entered my life. Not like a whirlwind, but like a late afternoon breeze, the kind you wait for, even without realizing it. I never imagined a feeling like that could bloom at 66, but there it was, growing with strong roots and simple flowers. A love that didn't rush, didn't demand, just walked by my side. If someone had told me a few years ago that I'd fall in love again after 60, I probably would have smiled politely and changed the subject, not out of disbelief in love, but because I thought my time had passed, that the stage of grand emotions had closed with the curtains of grief, longing, and grown children. I used to think love was a play you watched, only once, and if you were lucky, you gave it a standing ovation. But today, at 66, with a light heart and renewed eyes, I understand that the true show might come in the encore. Warren entered my life like an unexpected note in a familiar song. He didn't change the rhythm abruptly, nor throw me off key. He came in gently, respecting the beats, listening to my silences, understanding my pauses. And maybe that's why it was so profound. Because after so many years living for others, for my children, for memories of the past, for the fear of starting over, he taught me that there was still time, that there was still space. Today I look at the two of us with tenderness. We're not a movie couple. We don't have breathtaking scenes or passionate declarations in the rain. But we have coffees that warm more than words. We have conversations that last for hours, and silences that don't weigh anything. We have hand-in-hand walks, songs shared through text messages, and that look that, even without saying a word, says everything. I'm here. The other day, while he played piano in the empty rehearsal room, I caught myself thinking about how everything had changed since that first flyer in the bakery window. I just wanted to fill time, but I ended up filling so much more. I filled myself. Love after 60 isn't urgent, nor full of promises. It's whole. It comes when you know yourself well enough to understand what you deserve, and when you finally have the courage to receive it. Do you think it's too late for all this? I asked him once as we walked through the park. And he, with that calmness only he has, replied, "Estelle, sometimes the audience thinks it's over, but the best part comes in the encore." In that moment, I smiled and felt a knot unravel inside my chest. That was it. The love I was living now wasn't a forced restart or an attempt to relive the past. It was an encore, unexpected, deserved, and deeply true. A gift for those who had the courage to stay seated in the car. Audience, even after the applause. If you hear me now and think it's too late to feel all this again, I'll tell you. Time doesn't measure love. It only gives it context. And sometimes, it takes a whole life to finally understand what it means to love with calm, with soul, with truth. Because love, in its most beautiful form, arrives when you're no longer waiting for it. And that's exactly why it stays. If this story reminded you that there's still time, then help me share it with more people. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and send it to someone who also deserves to know they can still bloom. Sometimes, all we need is to hear that the encore might be the most beautiful part of the show.